What if I told you there was an ancient brotherhood of warriors, so loyal they would die for their king without hesitation, so fierce in battle, they became living legends, feared across medieval Europe? They weren't nobles. They weren't knights. They were the Huskarls, the elite Viking bodyguards who guarded kings and fought as their most trusted warriors. But how did they rise to power, and why did they vanish from history? Let's rewind to the early medieval era, Scandinavia in the 10th and 11th centuries. Viking rulers controlled vast kingdoms, but power was a dangerous game. Rivals lurked in every hall, and enemies sailed in on every tide. Enter the Huskarls or Huskarler in Old Norse, meaning housemen. At first, they were personal servants and household retainers. But in a brutal, war-torn world, rulers needed more than butlers. They needed bodyguards, deadly, disciplined, and absolutely loyal. By the time they reached their height, the Huskarls were no longer mere servants. They had become the king's personal guards, a warrior brotherhood bound by loyalty and honor. The transformation from servant to soldier didn't happen overnight. By the time of King Cnut the Great, who ruled over England, Denmark, and Norway in the early 11th century, Huskarls were the backbone of royal military power. These men weren't just guards standing around. They were professional, full-time warriors paid in silver and granite land. Their loyalty wasn't just about honor. It was rewarded handsomely. But it came at a price. Betray your king, and you'd be executed without mercy. The Huskarls' loyalty was absolute. They swore personal oaths to their lord, binding them in service for life. And these oaths were more than ceremonial. They were considered sacred, backed by ancient Norse traditions and beliefs. So what set the Huskarls apart from other warriors? It was their training, their weapons, and their discipline. The Huskarls were masters of the Dane Axe, a two-handed weapon with a blade so sharp it could cleave through helmets and armor. Picture this, a 6-foot warrior swinging a massive axe with deadly precision. These are no ordinary fighters. On the battlefield, they formed the legendary shield wall. Shoulder to shoulder, their shields overlapped like scales on a dragon. They were a human fortress. The Huskarls often took the front ranks, absorbing the enemy's charge and delivering devastating counterattacks. Unlike raiders or irregular warriors, the Huskarls trained year-round. They weren't part-time fighters. They were professional soldiers, some of the first standing armies in medieval Europe. Their armor was equally impressive. They wore heavy mail shirts, conical helmets with nose guards, and carried round shields painted with personal emblems. They were the elite troops every king wanted by his side. Loyalty was everything to the Huskarls. They took oaths of fealty, binding them to their lord for life. These oaths were sacred. Breaking them was considered worse than death. But their loyalty wasn't just to the king. There was a deep sense of brotherhood among Huskarls. They lived together, trained together, fought together. They were family. If a Huskarl fell in battle, his comrades would fight to recover his body. They made sure he had a proper burial, often sending him off in a fiery longboat to Valhalla. To them, honor and loyalty weren't just ideals. They were a way of life. This brotherhood created an unbreakable bond. It was said that Huskarl would rather die by his brother's side than live without him. The Huskarls earned their fearsome reputation in some of the most important battles of the medieval era. Most famously, they fought at the Battle of Hastings in 1066. On October 14th, King Harold Godwin's son of England led his army against William of Normandy. At the heart of the English shield wall stood Harold's personal Huskarls. For hours, they repelled Norman charges. Huskarls wielding their Dane axes cut down Norman knights with terrifying force. Chroniclers describe them splitting men and horses in two with a single blow. But as the day wore on, tragedy struck. King Harold was killed, legend says by an arrow to the eye. With their king dead, the English shield wall finally crumbled. Yet the Huskarls did not flee. They fought to the death around Harold's body. They died where they stood, protecting their king until the very end. It was a display of loyalty and bravery that echoed through history. After the Norman conquest of England, the Huskarls faded from history. Some fled back to Scandinavia. Others looked for new masters. Many found their way to Byzantium, joining the famous Varangian Guard, the personal bodyguards of the Byzantine emperors. There, they served in Constantinople and fought in distant wars across Asia Minor and the Holy Land. Though they were no longer Huskarls in name, their traditions lived on. The fearless Norse warriors became the backbone of the Varangian Guard, carrying their battle-hardened skills and legendary loyalty to a new empire. Today, the Huskarls are remembered as symbols of loyalty, courage, and brotherhood. They were more than bodyguards. They were professional soldiers who helped shape the destiny of Viking and Anglo-Saxon kings. Their story reminds us of time when loyalty was everything, when warriors would give their lives without question for their brothers and their lord. Though their names are lost to history, their legacy lives on in sagas, ancient runestones, and the legends of Viking warriors who stood firm when all others fell. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the world of the Huskarls, make sure to subscribe, give us a like, and ring that notification bell. What elite warriors should we cover next? Let us know in the comments below.